I got my girlfriend hired at our company, but then she filed a false harassment report against me to steal my position. The last few months have been a whirlwind of events that I am still trying to process. I'm in my early 30s, and for about 4 years I've been working in a corporate office in Chicago in the finance department. I started as a financial analyst, but through effort and dedication, I rose to become a senior finance manager, leading my own team. The job was quite satisfying. Good salary, decent benefits, and surprisingly, I enjoyed showing up every day, despite what many would consider routine. Almost a year ago, I met Amy at a friend's house during his move. She was charming, and like me, she worked in finance, though she was employed by a struggling startup downtown. The connection was instant. We talked about spreadsheets, market analysis, and other financial topics that you might think are boring but made sense to us. In a few months, Amy moved in with me. Despite how fast our relationship progressed, everything seemed to fit perfectly. We had common interests, compatible work schedules, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. I thought that after years of mediocre romantic experiences, I had finally found the right person. She met my parents during Sunday dinners and spent weekends with my friends. She was the ideal partner. However, luck took an unexpected turn when Amy's company went bankrupt. One Friday, during a surprise Zoom meeting, she was laid off without warning, leaving her completely bewildered. For weeks, I watched her consumed by a spiral of job applications. She faced constant rejections in a saturated job market while struggling to keep alive the confidence and spirit she had initially shown. Seeing her cry in secret, sleep until late noon, and barely eat was heartbreaking, as it was impossible to watch that bright light in her eyes vanish. Given her desperation, when the opportunity arose for a junior financial analyst position at my company, I decided to intervene. Although I knew that mixing work and romantic life could complicate things, I also recognized her skills. So I spoke with Sarah, a friend in human resources, and recommended Amy based solely on her professional potential. My recommendation opened the door for her, and in just 2 weeks, after a successful interview, she got the job. At first, everything seemed to improve. We shared the commute to work, occasionally ate lunch together, and Amy was extremely professional at the company. There were no excessive displays of affection or special requests, because she was my girlfriend. On the contrary, she tried even harder to prove she deserved to be there regardless of our personal relationship. But 2 months after she joined, strange things started happening. Amy began staying late at the office almost every night, claiming she suddenly wanted to impress the CFO. She was included in meetings with senior management, which was unusual for a junior analyst, raising certain suspicions in me. Furthermore, she showed an excessive interest in my projects, asking questions about financial models and reporting structures that exceeded what her position required. At first, I found her eagerness to learn adorable, but it soon became unsettling. Amy's behavior started to look suspicious. She came home euphoric, talking about conversations she clearly shouldn't be privy to, mentioning directors and future strategies naturally, as if they were lifelong friends, despite those projects not having been officially announced yet. On more than one occasion, she accidentally used my laptop, mistaking it for hers, and when I innocently asked her about her day, her answers swung between excessive vagueness and details so specific it seemed as if she were rehearsing a prepared speech. A strange and unpleasant feeling began to grow inside me. Something didn't add up in her behavior, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The situation took a turn last Monday when I was called into a meeting with human resources and the vice president of our department. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, and the HR manager avoided my gaze while the VP maintained a grim expression, similar to the one adopted just before announcing bad news or firing someone. In a measured and cold voice, the HR manager announced that a formal complaint had been filed against me. The accusations claimed that, taking advantage of my position, I had pressured a subordinate to enter into a relationship, and that I had also contributed to creating a hostile work environment. I froze. For a moment I laughed, not out of irony, but because my mind couldn't comprehend the absurdity of the situation. For years, I had maintained total professionalism, even avoiding interacting with my team outside the work environment and refusing after-office invitations to maintain clear boundaries. When I tried to find out who had filed the complaint, they told me they couldn't reveal details while the investigation was underway. Meanwhile, I was temporarily assigned to a remote, seemingly insignificant project to resolve the matter. With a broken heart, I collected my things, knowing that 4 years of hard work and a meticulously built reputation were being questioned by unfounded accusations. On the way back home, I couldn't stop mentally reviewing possible suspects among my colleagues. Jason from budgeting, whom I had always seen as resentful because I was promoted instead of him. Rachel from purchasing, with whom I had a heated meeting about 6 months ago, although nothing inappropriate ever happened. Or perhaps one of the new hires I had barely interacted with. Nothing fit. I arrived at my apartment exhausted and with a paranoid feeling, as if my mind were stuck in a loop of corrupt thoughts. That's when Amy appeared, radiant, dropped her purse by the door, and started talking quickly about an exclusive meeting she had been included in, a closed-door strategic session with the CFO, in which, according to her ideas had left everyone speechless. As I nodded without really paying attention, I noticed a change in the timing and access she had obtained overnight. It was then that all the strange behavior started to click in my mind. The abrupt change in her demeanor, the way she used to immediately stop talking when she saw me enter a room, her sudden habit of locking her phone, something she never did before, and her insistence on asking about projects that I hadn't even mentioned, projects that only senior management knew about. I didn't want to confront her immediately. I wanted to observe her reaction as I reclined on the sofa with my arms crossed and commented with a dry tone, "Today was a weird day at work." She barely paused to reply. Almost mechanically, she started a conversation about how someone apparently insinuated that she was being too friendly with other women. Her response, between an almost imperceptible pause and a clipped comment, left me with the feeling that details of a hidden plot behind her actions were finally beginning to unravel. The atmosphere became increasingly enigmatic, and I, meanwhile, was immersed in a mixture of disbelief, confusion, and unease. I've been working at this company for 4 years without any problems. Suddenly, a new hire, Amy, arrives, and at that precise moment, everything started to change. As I went about my routine, I watched her closely. She moved in a way that tried to seem carefree, but something in her gaze indicated to me that perhaps she was behaving in a calculated manner. I wondered if somehow someone was willing to do whatever it took to advance in the company, even to the point of pushing someone out of the way. "Jake, don't you think it's paranoid to see a strategy in everything?" she asked me in an apparently calm voice, but her tone reflected a growing tension. "Paranoid," I answered calmly, although my voice acquired a more incisive nuance, noticing that same week I was removed from all important projects and, to top it off, suddenly found myself surrounded by executives in the capacity of a junior analyst. She let out a nervous laugh before replying, "So, are you accusing me of stabbing you in the back?" I leaned toward her slightly, making it clear that my intention was not to accuse her but simply to understand how someone could ascend so quickly without knowing exactly which levers to pull and whom to direct their efforts toward. Silence stretched between us. I watched as the usual sparkle in her smile faded and her posture hardened as if she had maintained a facade for too long. Finally, Amy let down her mask. She looked at me with an intensity I had never seen before. At that precise moment, she stopped pretending and let out a long, controlled sigh. "You know what? It doesn't matter anymore. It's all said and done," she declared in a dry voice. "That's it?" I asked incredulously at the frankness of her tone. "You're not stupid, Jake. You know very well why we reached this point. I got you that job. I took a risk for you. Do you really think HR would have even considered your resume without my recommendation?" she replied, shaking her head in a gesture that mixed resignation and a certain mockery, as if she were weighing whether honesty was worth it in this context. "I appreciate the initial boost, but we can't pretend that was enough," she added coldly. "I never thought I could climb from a junior position so quickly. She wasn't expressing anger, but rather stating the facts, almost factually, as if explaining the weather forecast. "So your solution was to destroy my career to take my place?" I asked, amazed by her direct admission. "Not exactly," she replied. "Perhaps the situation was already resolved." It was then that I noticed that, despite her apparent calm, her attitude evidenced that she no longer felt passion, not even towards what was once a shared dream. I was impacted not only to know that she planned to professionally harm me, but that our relationship, or what we had built, seemed to have lost all its meaning. According to her, it was preferable to invent false accusations than to face reality and simply break up. Maintaining a low but decidedly firm tone, I approached her and said, "Amy, you have crossed a line. What you just did is not just pettiness. It's something that could completely end your career. False accusations are not a simple gray area. They are a legal landmine that could detonate at any moment. If you think I'm going to stand idly by while you distort the truth, you're wrong." She didn't flinch, letting out a slight smile, as if she were bored with the conversation. The breakup wasn't going to improve my professional situation. However, I couldn't allow any further manipulation. With a firm voice, I ordered her, "Pack your things. You have until tomorrow night to find somewhere else to stay." "I live here too," she replied, trying to justify her stay. "You allowed me to move in. This isn't just your decision." "That apartment was mine before you even brought one suitcase," I replied, reminding her definitively that the legal responsibility was mine. Her face hardened, but she had no arguments to reply. "We are finished, Amy," I said, with the conviction of someone ending everything at once. "Completely finished," I added, stepping back as if her presence was something repulsive. "You're overreacting," she murmured, losing the confidence she usually displayed, aware of having crossed a boundary. "Very well, I'll pack the essentials tonight, and the rest I'll move later," she concluded. Meanwhile, she picked up some clothes and toiletries, acting as if my decision was unfair. Before leaving, Amy issued one final warning. "This wouldn't have been necessary if you had simply supported me to advance in the company. You could have recommended me for management positions, but you were always so worried about avoiding conflicts of interest and earning your position. Not everyone has the luxury of waiting years for recognition." Her words were the final straw. I looked at her enraged and was left alone in our apartment, trying to understand how the woman I trusted could be so calculating. That night, sleep completely eluded me. I reviewed every conversation about work, every document she might have seen on my laptop, every detailed financial analysis I had ever shared with her. However, I remembered something fundamental that sparked a small flicker of hope in me. I have always been obsessive about documentation and communication. I keep records of everything, emails, meetings, even recorded with consent, and meticulous notes of every important work interaction. The next day, instead of facing a possible investigation process immediately, I sent an email to HR in which I expressed, "I understand that it is necessary to thoroughly investigate these accusations. I will cooperate fully and trust that the truth will come to light. Please inform me if you need additional information." I began compiling my evidence. I assembled a timeline of all the interactions I had with Amy in public spaces or in groups. I gathered testimonies from colleagues who could corroborate my professional conduct and retrieved text messages that evidenced that our relationship existed long before she joined the company, proving that we were already living together beforehand. Furthermore, I found dozens of photographs from events, trips, and family gatherings that completely refuted her claims. Most significantly, however, I found on our shared cloud service, set up when we moved in together, several screenshots that Amy had taken of confidential company documents. Among these were the salaries of management positions, including mine, and quarterly financial forecasts not yet publicly disclosed. This made it clear that the situation had escalated to something more serious than a conflict of interest. It was a case of corporate espionage. I did not confront her again, nor did I resort to social media to campaign against her. Instead, I meticulously compiled and organized all the evidence. From the beginning, I decided to act decisively. I provided HR with all the factual and organized information regarding the accusations, letting the investigation take its course. I kept other proofs as aces up my sleeve and, in parallel, concentrated on the temporary project I had been assigned, determined to prove my worth to the company regardless of the circumstances. For the next 2 weeks, I received no concrete answers. While working from a coffee shop, I learned from sporadic messages from colleagues that Amy had removed most of her belongings and, according to rumors, had joined leadership meetings, presenting financial analyses surprisingly similar to those I had discussed in departmental sessions. Yesterday afternoon, I received a call from the vice president and the head of human resources asking me to attend a meeting that same morning at 8. Although they refused to give details by phone, I noticed a different tone in their voices, less severe and more apologetic. I arrived early, smartly dressed and professional, despite my racing heart. The meeting was brief but decisive. After reviewing the investigation, they confirmed that there was no evidence whatsoever to support the false accusations. In fact, they discovered that the complaint had been filed maliciously with the aim of manipulating the staff for personal gain. The vice president, visibly embarrassed, offered me a sincere apology. "We owe you an apology, Jake. We had to take the accusation seriously, but we should have handled it better. Your position has been immediately reinstated with appropriate compensation for the inconvenience caused." I was given the explanation that they could not disclose the specific measures taken against the employee who filed the false report, as they had to maintain confidentiality, although we all knew who they were referring to. Furthermore, they assured me that the company's policy on unfounded complaints was being rigorously applied. As they finished, I handed them a sealed envelope with additional information I had discovered during my own investigation. The vice president, intrigued, asked, "What is this?" I showed him evidence that, although not directly related to the harassment complaint, revealed significant unauthorized access to confidential company information by Amy. The moment those documents were brought to light, the atmosphere in the room radically transformed. The vice president's face went from apology to an unshakable, cold expression. After making a quick call, he addressed me again, saying, "Thank you for informing us. We will take immediate action." Less than half an hour after leaving that meeting, when I returned to my real desk, next to my team, a company-wide email arrived, announcing important organizational changes. To my surprise, my name appeared as officially reinstated to the position of Senior Finance Manager, in addition to being assigned to lead a new initiative. Amy's name had vanished from the list. It wasn't long before my phone started blowing up. First, I received a message from Amy asking, "What did you do?" Then another, "My badge isn't working," followed by increasingly frantic calls. By noon, I had dozens of messages ranging from confusion and anger to desperate pleas. However, I decided not to respond to any of them. Office rumors circulated that Amy had arrived at the building that morning and was met by security personnel at the entrance, who escorted her directly to a conference room where HR and the legal department were waiting for her. Upon trying to use her laptop, she discovered it was locked. They confronted her not only about the false complaint, but also about accessing and copying confidential information. Evidence was found that she had been sending company secrets to her personal account through her work account for weeks. So, what started as a firing turned into a case of possible criminal conduct. They confiscated her corporate phone and laptop on the spot. When she tried to take her personal phone, they informed her that since it had been used to capture confidential information, it also needed to be reviewed. She refused, worsening the situation even more, and security escorted her out while she screamed, demanding to speak with the CFO, assuring them it was a misunderstanding. According to the receptionist, 2 hours later, she was still seen outside the building, alternating calls to me and asking other employees to help her get in. Strangely, despite everything, I didn't feel the expected satisfaction inside. Rather, I was overcome by exhaustion and sadness upon confirming that someone I trusted could be so calculating. However, a cold determination was also born in me. She tried to destroy my career without a second thought. But actions have consequences. I blocked her number and spent several days with a friend, fearing she would try to come to my apartment, whose lock I had already changed. It turned out that when the situation demanded it, I could also play the game. A week after the incident, things intensified even more. After blocking her number, Amy began reappearing in every possible way. Emails from unknown addresses, messages relayed through mutual friends, and even a handwritten letter slid under my friend's apartment door. With no explanation of how she had found the place, which unsettled me more than expected. First, she accused me of tipping them off. Then she changed her tone, downplaying the situation and alleging it was a disproportionate lie. Shortly after came compassion and pleading with messages like, "Please, just talk to me," as if there was still something left to explain. I decided to ignore all these communications. The most unusual development occurred 3 days ago. Amy somehow got my mother's phone number and called her, sobbing, saying that I had misinterpreted the situation and even claiming that we were engaged, albeit supposedly in the middle of an argument. This complicated the matter even more, as my mother and sister came to believe her version and flooded my phone with messages, insisting that I should hear her side of the story and that relationships require effort, among other arguments. When I tried to explain what had happened, they felt I was being dramatic and that she had simply made a mistake as insignificant as putting salt in coffee, not like destroying someone's life. Even my father, normally firm in his convictions, suggested that I be the bigger man and at least talk to her. No one truly understood what it feels like when someone you trust tries to ruin your life for their own benefit. As for the work situation, the company had technically absolved me of all blame. But let's be realistic. A harassment accusation leaves an indelible mark. During meetings, they would tell me, "We believe you, Jake. We know you didn't do anything wrong." But in the hallways, I noticed side glances, conversations that stopped when I appeared, and forced smiles from those who previously genuinely laughed at my jokes. My reputation was shattered. The day after my reinstatement, while grabbing coffee in the break room, 3 colleagues suddenly stood up to attend urgent meetings. By noon, I found myself eating alone at my desk, distracted on my phone, pretending I liked it that way, while my colleagues were kind but distant, as if I were radioactive. Only my direct subordinates acted normally, probably out of fear of contradicting me. Nothing encourages integration like feeling like a pariah with authority. After a week of uncomfortable coexistence, I decided to talk confidentially with my vice president, Mark. One evening, I found him in his office and told him directly, "I'm noticing discomfort in the team regarding my reinstatement." Mark, initially avoiding my gaze, finally sighed and said, "Jake, I'll be honest with you. Your reputation here has become complicated. Perhaps a fresh start would be best for everyone." In other words, they practically wanted me to disappear without resorting to a formal firing that could lead to lawsuits. I pointed out that despite being absolved, everyone knew Amy had lied, drawing a distinction between knowing and believing. With textbook corporate coldness, they made it clear that they couldn't force anyone to feel comfortable. Thus, I was cleared of all guilt, but practically unemployable at the company to which I had dedicated 4 years of my life. That same night, I started sending out resumes. Finding a new position in finance would be difficult. I had brilliant performance reviews, but also a fresh harassment accusation, something that the Human Resources Department, due to legal provisions, could neither confirm nor deny during a reference check. Despite the skepticism, my first week of job searching went with some optimism. With a solid resume and proven experience, I applied to 15 positions that weekend, customizing each cover letter as if my financial future depended on it. Finally, I landed an interview at a mid-sized financial services firm downtown. The first phone call was very positive. My qualifications perfectly matched what they were looking for, and the recruiter was genuinely enthusiastic about integrating me into the team. The in-person interview also started promisingly, as the hiring manager seemed impressed by my project experience and technical knowledge. However, the dreaded question arrived: "Why are you looking to leave your current position?" When I entered the first interview, I had my speech rehearsed. "I'm looking for new challenges and growth opportunities," I said, putting on the best smile I could practice in front of the mirror. I admitted that my current company had allowed me to learn a lot, but that there was no ceiling for me there anymore. The manager tilted her head almost imperceptibly and asked if there was any other reason for resigning. My voice trembled. I'm terrible at lying. The rest of the meeting was just paperwork. Her questions became short and mechanical. I never received the call back. In the second interview, with a larger firm, I chose to be ambiguous about my departure and highlighted what attracted me to them. 3 days later, a cordial email, the same negative response. The third was the worst. The interviewer, Trevor, with a power tie and suffocating cologne, seemed to have fresh information. Halfway through the conversation, he blurted out, "Look, I have to ask, is there any incident at your previous job that you need to disclose? We conduct thorough checks." I felt my stomach drop. I denied it. He insisted that his company advocated an environment of respect. I later found out that a friend of Amy's worked in his HR department and had already disclosed her version of the story. The world is small, and gossip is infinite. By the end of the third week without a job, my savings were evaporating. I had always been tidy with money, but I never planned on being unemployed because of a psychopathic girlfriend. The rental contract, now solely in my name, was expiring, and the landlord intended to raise it by 15%. Without a stable income, it was unaffordable. I moved from my friend Tyler's sofa to the cheapest studio I could find, a cubbyhole above the city's noisiest bar and below someone who, I swear, was training elephants to tap dance at 3 a.m. The walls were so thin I could hear the neighbors breathing, and the shower seemed to spit drops at me with contempt. The furniture included a mattress that too vividly remembered the silhouette of the previous owner, a wobbly table held up by phone books, and a refrigerator that growled as if plotting. But for $50 a month, you don't demand luxury. I had enough trouble begging the bank to accept my card. While I was eating ramen for the 5th consecutive night, the legal team at my old company was fine-tuning the artillery against Amy. Kevin, a former colleague, gave me war updates every time we met. He was paying for the beers now. They discovered that Amy was forwarding confidential budgeting emails to her personal account, sorting them by folder. She would go from office to office asking innocent questions about future projects and then sell those ideas in meetings with management. Corporate parasitism in its purest state, executed with surgical precision. The most incriminating finding was drafts of emails where she rehearsed her workplace harassment story, version A versus version B, testing which accusations would sound more plausible. She didn't even bother to delete the history. She forgot that drafts are saved on the servers and that IT monitors search patterns. And the icing on the cake. Among the stolen information were details of an impending merger. The company planned to acquire a smaller firm with a key client portfolio. Amy had already contacted one of their accountants on LinkedIn. Result: a restraining order in process, a civil lawsuit, and a possible criminal complaint for industrial espionage. A bitter comfort, but comfort nonetheless. 2 months later, desperation forced me to broaden my radius. I would accept positions for which I was overqualified, in cities I had never considered, and even in barely related sectors. Unemployment benefits covered 60% of my former salary, slowly eating away at my emergency fund. Interviews 4, 5, and 6. Initial interest, sudden silence. I started to suspect that Amy was sabotaging my candidacies. Paranoia, perhaps, but after everything I had been through, nothing seemed impossible. The 7th interview was at a modest management firm specializing in mid-level clients. Nothing glamorous, but stable. After reviewing my resume, the director took a deep breath. "Look, Jake, your competencies are clear, but rumors are circulating about your previous departure. Tell me your version, off the record." Tired of dancing around the issue, I decided to take a gamble. I carried my evidence folder with me, screenshots, emails, a timeline, witness statements. It was my security blanket, proof that I wasn't crazy. When I finished, the guy nodded, wide-eyed. "Wow, that's intense, but now I understand why you came so prepared. Here, we value those who document everything. Exactly what we need in financial analysis." He offered me the position. The salary was 30% lower, and the position was a step back, senior analyst. But it was a lifeline. I accepted without negotiating, pathetically grateful. Day after day, I rebuilt my reputation. I volunteered for tedious projects, corrected others' spreadsheets, brought donuts on Fridays, and became the unofficial tech support because I knew how to clear the print queue without restarting the server. The worst part was the family solitude. My mother and sister defended Amy and branded me as vengeful for not stopping the lawsuit. I tried to explain that the company was acting on its own. They didn't understand and stopped talking to me except for brief messages at holidays. "You always hold grudges. Amy made a mistake, but she's going through hell," my sister wrote. A mistake is forgetting to put sugar in coffee, not ruining someone's career and stealing corporate secrets. My mother was harsher, convinced that Amy was the right one and that I was destroying my chance at happiness. Crying, she told me that Amy just wanted to prove her worth and that the situation got out of hand. That hurt more than any job rejection. I stopped justifying myself. My father, at least, called frequently. "How's the new apartment going?" he'd ask, pretending not to hear the echo of my empty apartment or the drunken karaoke from the bar. "Great. It has a lot of character," I'd lie. He would grunt without pressing. "You always land on your feet, son." I started therapy. 2 sessions were enough for the psychologist to sigh. "Welcome to the corporate world. The truth weighs less than appearances." Then she wanted to analyze my pattern of attracting manipulative partners more than the recent trauma. When I described Amy's calculated betrayal, she asked, "What do you think led you to someone capable of that?" As if I had chosen a sociopath from a catalog. What gnaws at me the most isn't the professional setback, but doubting my own judgment. There were signs I ignored. I was so eager for a relationship that I overlooked her red flags. I hear her phrase over and over, "I need more, faster." I wonder if now, on the brink of a criminal case, she believes it was worth it. Meanwhile, my biggest daily decision is whether to use Arial or Times New Roman in the monthly reports, although my new chair has lumbar support, a real luxury. Some nights lying down, I listen to the bass thump from the bar and review alternative endings. What if I had never recommended her? What if I had noticed her memorizing my analyses? What if I had been less trusting, less helpful, less in love? But hindsight is always perfect when contemplating the wreckage.